Let's dive right into this explainer. When we think about what threatens deep thought today, we almost automatically blame the smartphone, right? But Toni Morrison actually saw the real, underlying threats to our reading and writing lives long before we were all carrying screens in our pockets. Today, we're going to unpack her brilliant, absolutely crucial concept of the dancing mind. We'll uncover exactly what threatens it, and more importantly, how we can protect it.
Picture this. It's 1996. The 1990s were bringing massive cultural shifts with the dawn of the internet, what people back then excitedly called the information highway. And there was this huge public panic that computers were just going to completely destroy literature and public discourse. But Morrison, she looked right past that technological panic. She recognized that the true peril to our intellectual lives didn't come from a computer screen, but from unrecognized, far more sinister quarters that were actively changing how we engage with the world.
We're grounding our exploration today directly in Morrison's speech, delivered when she accepted the National Book Foundation Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters back on November 6, 1996. Published by Knopf in 2003, it's this incredibly timeless text that speaks just as urgently to us right now.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the real threat to reading. Second, defining the dancing mind. Third, the privilege of busyness. Fourth, the price of writing. And finally, protecting the dancing mind.
Okay, Section 1. The real threat to reading. Looking beyond the dawn of the internet. To truly grasp this threat, we have to look past the obvious tech shifts and peer deeply into human behavior. Which brings us to Section 2. Defining the dancing mind. What exactly are we trying to protect? Well, before we can understand the threats, we've got to anchor ourselves in Morrison's central concept. Morrison defines this as a very specific kind of peace. It isn't just the absence of war. It isn't some passive surrender to the status quo. And it certainly isn't at the mercy of history's rule. The peace she's thinking of is the dance of an open mind when it engages another equally open one. And she notes that this activity occurs most naturally and most often right inside the reading and writing world. It's an active, vigilant connection between two minds. Think about it like a partnered ballroom dance. Writing might seem like a totally solitary act, but it absolutely needs a partner to be complete. The writer offers the fruits of their imaginative intelligence. They lead the steps. But the reader has to actively follow, interpret, and engage in this intimate, sustained surrender to their own mind while it touches someone else's. It requires complete focus. It requires synchronicity. It's a beautifully shared effort.
Moving on to Section 3, the privilege of busyness, the threat of excess in America, because this delicate dance is very much under attack.
Let's start with the story Morrison shares about a graduate student living in a uniquely modern, vacuum-pressured environment. He grew up in an affluent community with caring parents, and his whole life was packed with carefully selected activities. Captain of the team, theater club, Latin prize winner, taking all these fascinating educational trips, a permanent fixture on the honor roll. We all know this type, right? It perfectly captures our modern trophy-driven culture. He was overscheduled, constantly stimulated, and completely alienated from his own company.
But here is the crazy part. It wasn't until this young man reached an elite PhD program that he realized he had a terrifying disability, and it all revolves around the number 4. In all those years of exceptional education, he had literally never learned to sit in a room by himself and read for 4 hours, and then have those 4 hours followed by another 4 without any companionship but his own mind. His fine education had completely hampered him. He said it was the absolute hardest thing he ever had to do. He had to resort to autodidactic strategies. Basically, he had to actively teach himself this old-fashioned habit from scratch. He had to force himself to be alone with a book he wasn't assigned to read, a book with no test at the end, sitting there without the comfort or really the disturbance of a phone, radio, or TV. This just perfectly illustrates how cultural busyness and the terror of growing up vacuum-pressured in an excessive culture actively harms our capacity for independent intellectual growth.
Now, let's contrast that completely. Section 4. The price of writing. The threat of oppression abroad. This is a drastically different threat.
Morrison heard this next story directly from a brilliantly educated woman writer from Strasbourg. Morrison recalls being totally awestruck by this woman's articulateness, how easily she moved between languages and histories. But right in the middle of their animated conversation, the woman just began to cry. Great tears rolling down her face. She didn't even wipe them away, she just looked right at Morrison and said, "You have to help us. They are shooting us down in the street." She was talking about women who dared to write against the grain of a suffocating regime.
And that brings us to a really stark reality. For this splendidly educated woman, offering her imaginative intelligence to another person came with the very real fear of death. The danger here isn't just the mild disdain a comfortable writer in a free country might face. No, it's the physical, terrifying danger of living where modern art is literally illegal, subject to official vigilantism and murder. This is the mortal danger of publishing unpoliced narrative.
It's wild, right? These two totally disparate anecdotes perfectly synthesize the dual threats to our modern reading and writing life. On one side, you have a comfortable young American absolutely stunned by the bounty of his trophy-driven culture, facing the terror of pure solitude. On the other side, an international writer in a suffocating regime facing the mortal fear of oppression just for putting pen to paper. They seem worlds apart, yet they both perfectly capture what happens when our environments violently disrupt that dancing mind. Whether it's the danger of a busied-up culture stripping away our capacity for solitude, or a government using violence to silence inquiry, the threat to deep intellectual connection is incredibly severe.
This leads us to our final section. Section 5, Protecting the Dancing Mind and Securing the Peace of the Reading Life. Recognizing these two extreme threats, how in the world do we push back?
Well, Morrison reminds us to look at the publishing industry itself. Sure, publishing is a business filled with glamour, high spirits, and unbridled ego. But she basically calls all of that just the costume. The real pulsing life underneath is deadly serious. Its true purpose is creating, producing, and distributing knowledge to make it possible for both the entitled and the dispossessed to experience their minds dancing with another's. It's all about making sure that absolutely no private wealth, political wing, or cultural expediency can interfere with that sacred exchange.
So, what can we do on an individual level? We can actively protect our deep reading habits by applying 3 key takeaways from Morrison's observations. Number 1, practice unstructured solitude. Force yourself, just like that graduate student, to read unassigned books without the distraction of screens or impending tests. 2, support unpoliced narratives. Recognize your privilege to read freely and champion the voices that speak against the grain. And 3, defend literature from cultural expediency. Don't let reading become just another checklist item or a trophy in an overscheduled life. Treat it as a vital, peaceful engagement of minds.
I want to leave you with this final, critical question to evaluate your own habits. Are you actively defending your solitary hours, or are you letting your dancing mind slip away into the busyness of modern life? Securing the peace of the dancing mind is our responsibility. Because, as that brave woman from Strasbourg told Toni Morrison when asking for help, there isn't anybody else.